Hello, folks. Welcome back to The Plank, presented by Ram. I'm Tom Corin. Okay, it is time for our fantasy football segment. And is the case every week, diamond in the rough emerges for big numbers. So let's head outside to our fantasy football guru, Matt McGuire, who's out there to tell us all about a few guys. One of these guys from the Seattle Seahawks. Matt, take it away.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, you're right about that. There's definitely diamonds in the rough every single week. Key with fantasy football, you try to identify them before anyone else does, and that's what we try to look at every week here on the Ram Fantasy Football Tailgate, is that waiver wire and who you might want to add. But we're through 12 weeks now in the NFL season. Week 13 is almost upon us. That means it's almost playoff time in fantasy football, and there's nothing that worries fantasy football owners more come playoff time than inconsistency. You know, you got guys like Sammy Watkins, had a huge week this week, 6 catches, over 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. But then if you look at his games the last 2 weeks, he only had 3 catches each game for about 20 or 30 yards. So which player is going to show up? And when it's playoff time and it's win or go home, it makes fantasy owners a little bit nervous. But when you look at the waiver wire, this late in the season, it's a lot of those high-risk, high-reward type of guys. The first one I want to talk about is Marcus Wheaton for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had a huge week with 9 catches, 201 yards, and a touchdown in that shootout against the Steelers and Seahawks this week. But if you look at the previous 10 games, he only had 16 catches on the season coming into that big game. So what player is going to show up next week or the week after? You know, your guess is as good as mine. That's why you got to really look at what the reward is based on the risk for adding these guys on your team. Another player that I want to talk about is Devontae Parker for the Miami Dolphins. He was their first pick this year in the draft, so obviously the Dolphins are pretty high on him. He had a good game last week. He had 4 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown. A lot of that was in garbage time. But what worries me, and I see a lot of people picking him up, is that he hasn't had a catch since week 3 prior to yesterday. So is he really somebody that you're going to trust with a roster spot come playoff time? I'm not so sure about that. But a guy who is out there and he's available in over 65% of the leagues is Doug Baldwin. And that might be the guy that, Tom, you're talking about, who had that big week in Seattle. He had 3 touchdowns, over 160 yards, and, you know, he's had good games the last 2 or 3 weeks. So I think he's somebody that you can rely on, a little bit more consistency in Doug Baldwin. Jimmy Graham just went out for the season for the Seahawks, so that means more available targets are going to be out there for Doug Baldwin in that Seahawks passing game. So if you need help at wide receiver, look to see if Doug Baldwin's available in your league. And another guy, speaking of Jimmy Graham getting hurt at the tight end position, if he was your tight end and you're looking for help at the tight end position, you might want to look at Vance McDonald for the San Francisco 49ers. He's had back-to-back solid weeks at the tight end position. This week he had 6 catches, 71 yards and a touchdown. He had another touchdown the week before. And if you look at the 49ers passing game, they've got a new quarterback in Blaine Gabbert. And right when he came to starting quarterback, you see Vance McDonald's production starting going up. So he's somebody you might want to rely on at the tight end position there if you need help, if you had Jimmy Graham, or maybe the tight end that you had on your team is struggling. But that's all I've got here for the Ram Fantasy Football Tailgate in Week 12. Back to you in the studio, Tom.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Matt. Now, we won't be having any post-game honors coming for the Bucs this week. Now, quarterback Jameis Winston, I think was like everybody else. He was disappointed in the outcome of what happened in Indianapolis yesterday, but he did reiterate the Buccaneers are still in the hunt.
Our situation, man, we've been here before. You know, we done lost before, and we done bounced back. Obviously, we love to be back at home. It's going to be important for us, but we got to bounce back. You know, I can't. When I talk to the guys, I can't stress enough. We have been here before. The season is not over. Got to keep playing.
All right, when we come back, we're going to reveal who will walk the plank this week. We'll be back right after this.